Good afternoon, racing fans. It is a Breeders' Cup time. It's the best time of year. Jim Miller and Emily Gullikson are taking a look at some of the special wagers for the Breeders' Cup. We did a video already on the Pick 3 on Friday. It's a nice $3 Pick 3 wager that should provide some value. But this video now, Emily, is covering the Saturday all-turf Pick 4. And the weather looks great at Keeneland all weekend long. This is an exceptional sequence. The thing I like about this wager a little bit more, Emily, it's just a 50-cent base minimum wager, so you can get a little bit more coverage. But this is a sequence that should be a whole lot of fun, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. It's another good sequence. A lot of turf racing, getting a lot of turf handicapping practice throughout this sequence. But it's still the same thing we want to keep in mind as far as the tickets is, you can spread a little bit, but you still want to think about, your expected value at the end. Make sure you have some good combinations that are going to pay out within that sequence. Take on some favorites, take some stands. But yeah, a great sequence.
It really is a great sequence. And we kick things off at Keeneland in race number 4 on Saturday. So this is a sequence where you really have to have your patience because you're starting early in that card. It's carrying you all the way to the second to last race in the card as you look at the sequence. It's the even races throughout the course of the afternoon. Races 4, 6, 8, and 10. Turf Sprint, Filly and Mare Turf, the Breeders' Cup Mile, and the Breeders' Cup Turf. These are races, Emily, that have European horses left and right that can be factors that you have to put so much time and effort in to look at the replays, make your determinations what you want to see. And you've mentioned time and again, your team does a lot of this homework for everybody, looks at a lot of these videos, and it's something that could be a great resource for everybody as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it'll just save you so much time. And I mean, that's really why we do it is it's not so much that, we're the only ones that know how to watch replays. I mean, we know watching replays has an art form to it, but it's so time consuming and it can really grind you out, especially with these sequences that if you spend all your time watching replays, by the time it comes down to putting your tickets together, you're just mentally exhausted. So yeah, it's a huge asset. It's a huge edge. And again, we do have a lot of practice watching races. So it's good information as well.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about it too is you look at it from a handicapper's aspect, you look at it from a chart caller's aspect too, because a lot of times you see comments and past performances. A chart caller may see something a little bit differently than what you see as well. And that's something that you have to make your determination on going forward for how you want to take that information and use it moving forward. So we kick things off here with this all-turf Pick 4 with the Turf Sprint. Race number 4 at Keeneland, 5.5 furlongs on the turf. Again, Emily, plan on the turf course being firm throughout the course of the day. And this is a really good race to start things off. You have a nice mix of horses from the U.S. and from overseas. You have the possibility of some prices, but you also have a couple of horses that could be very tough at short prices. So I guess the first one to start with here is going to be the 6. That's Highfield Princess. This is the French bred horse. This is a horse that I think should be a solid contender the entire way, has been really good all year long. But man, those last 2 races have been ultra impressive. I went back and watched those replays. This is one of those where you see that turn of foot inside the final furlong, and it's something different than what you see from a lot of other racehorses.
Oh yeah, she's very solid. I mean, she's going to be a short price in here, legitimate type horse. Absolutely belongs in this race.
Yep, and she's one of those where I went back and looked, and it's like the footing that she tends to pick up, the ground that she covers late, she'll come alongside a horse and you'll think, okay, yeah, it's one of those things. She's in the mix, and then all of a sudden she just explodes. And this is one of the things that you have to look at too is overseas. The last race had 19 starters in it. It's not like you're looking at a short field of 6, 7, or 8. You're looking at massive fields that these horses are beating rather easily. You consider almost a short field, 2 back, where the horse only had 12 other opponents in that race. But Highfield Princess is a horse that I think should be a very good contender, and they're a very solid choice. Now, a horse that we touched on when we were talking about the Pick 3 just slightly, just because you mentioned the running style a little bit, is Golden Pal. Now, Golden Pal, a horse that's already won over the course, and I know this was a horse that you like quite a bit as well. I'll be curious to see, you think 2 to 1 is what you're going to get, or do you think people will go a little bit shorter?
I mean, they could go shorter, but I mean, in the purpose of like the Pick 4 sequence, it's a horse that's going to be favored because he'll be on a lot of tickets. Same thing with Highfield Princess; they'll be used heavily in those legs. So yeah, there won't be that much value. I mean, he could probably stay at around 2 to 1 because of Highfield Princess being in the race. But I think both in terms of the Pick 4 race, these 2 are going to be heavily used on most of the tickets.
Yeah, and I agree with you as well. And Golden Pal, just looking at this race too, you look up and down, pace is something that you're going to have to make that determination too. How many are going to go out there and show speed? How many are going to settle back? And really, for a turf sprint, you'd figure, oh, half the field's winging it for the front end. It's really not the case in this race. There's not a ton of early speed. So I think that's also the reason why a horse like Golden Pal should be in the mix. Now, I have to ask you about this horse here, Emily, because I know you like some prices, and I know there's always horses that can pop up there at a little bit of a price. Did I see Go Bears Go on your ticket? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of like a little bit of a homer now that I'm living here in Chicago,
Okay.
going with Go Bears Go, but he's actually, kind of a legitimate horse. I mean, he ran very well in the Breeders' Cup last year as a juvenile. Was down inside, that was kind of on the better part of the track, but it was a very good race. And even watching his races this season, he's kind of a gritty horse. He has some speed, doesn't like to pass or doesn't like to let horses pass him. So has that tactical speed, has some class. And then the connections have actually been kind of pointing to run him in the States this year. They were initially looking at a race at Kentucky Downs. It was a 6.5 furlong race. And they were going to kind of, maybe the distance isn't that great, but the purse are so big, we'll go for it. And then they've been pointing to this one. The 5.5 is right in this horse's wheelhouse. And, a big price of a horse that has some quality to him. They've already come to the Breeders' Cup. They've had sort of this race in the back of their mind. The big number, and I imagine this horse will be a big number in this field. It's one that a horse I just definitely have to use.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. The best thing is when a horse shows they can handle the ship and handle it well and still run well. And like you mentioned, this is something this horse has already shown. It's one of the weird quirks, too. This race is one of the weird quirks about the Breeders' Cup because it depends on track configuration for what the distance is. Last year, this race was at 5/8 of a mile. This year, this race is at 5.5. The distance is one of those things. It always killed me when the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile was run at a mile 70 at tracks because they couldn't handle a mile distance. A 16th of a mile to some people may not seem like a lot. To a horse like Go Bears Go, it could seem like a whole heck of a lot. And if you're that tiring type of speed, it's a big difference too. I think the 5.5 furlongs is a good distance for this race. But what do you think about the difference between going 5/8 last year to going 5.5 this year?
Well, this is, according to the trainer, this is what they want. They
Yeah.
want this. They want this 5.5. They were actually like a little bit concerned that it was going to be at 5,
Right.
but that liking this 5.5, and that's sort of why they've been at the 6. So, I have no issues with it for this particular horse.
Yeah, I kind of like
And,
it too.
and you mentioned the ship as well. He does ship very well, and that was another thing that they mentioned, that he loves to get on the bus and ship. So, yeah, big price, some things to like. It's definitely going to be in that ticket.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. It's one of the best things too about racing at Keeneland. The airport's literally right across the street. So you land, you get off the plane, you're basically in your stall. That's how close the airport is there to Keeneland. So something worth taking in a note. All right, the sixth race, the second of our races in the sequence, is the Filly and Mare turf. It's a 1 3/16 on the turf in here. There's a horse that I love in this spot. There's a horse that, thank goodness, you have it on the ticket as well. I'd feel really badly if you didn't. It is the horse that's going to be the favorite, but let's start with Nashua in here. What did you see out of Nashua in this race?
Well, this is the one that you love, right? I mean,
Yep.
she is very legitimate in here, a proven grade 1 or group 1 winner. So there's no knocks. There's no knocks on her. And I mean, really, she's sort of the reason why I'm using above the curve as well, both coming out of that same common race, because, they're both quality.
Yeah, and when you're looking for price, Nashua is a horse that is going to be the favorite. I watched a lot of the replays. I love the way that she goes here. The distance definitely suits. I think trip-wise, there's a lot of early pace in this race too. And Nashua is one of those that kind of settles back just a little bit early on and then comes running at him late. And that's the thing that I like. When you're going the 1 3/16, it's a long run into that first turn, so nobody should get hung really wide early on. Should be able to kind of work out that trip. And even if you have to angle out to the center of that course at Keeneland, it's not a bad place to be in the lane as long as you can save that ground through the turn. So Nashua is the horse that I did single on in there. Now, like you mentioned, you go a little bit deeper because you try to find some value. You mentioned above the curve in that spot. This is a horse that's sitting at 9-2, who was only a nose behind Nashua in that last out. But then you have a couple of others near the outside in the 9 and the 11. I'm curious to see what you're going to get price-wise on these two. Both of these horses, especially an Italian, ran really well in that last out. Could be a part of the pace scenario. But what did you like about those two near the outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think we differ as far as this pace scenario.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know it's going to be as contentious. And I know as far as an Italian that she's a proven runner, right? She gets out in front and she'll go to the lead. And so I don't have to necessarily worry about her, kind of wanting to take back or wanting to rate. And I think that might be kind of the strategy with some of the others, like going to Vegas and some of those other horses that could certainly be on the lead, but I know that In Italian is definitely going to go. And it's just, you watch these races and think about the jockeys that they want to conserve and have some kick late. And then that can often just let the front runner just cruise. And so keeping that scenario in mind is why I used In Italian. I much prefer the 9 Roger.
Yep.
I think she's super quality. My really one concern with her was she was so good at Woodbine, and that was not an easy trip by any. I mean, it could have been an excuse at multiple times. Just how much that takes out of her coming back in 28 days. Because there probably was, if it wasn't as taxing of an effort, even if she didn't win, might be a scenario where I single her because of the price and because I think that she could certainly win this race. Maybe is the best, but I'm just a little bit concerned that timing and off a taxing effort. But yeah, she's one that I think is a use regardless, especially at the price.
Yeah, and then one thing that I found so interesting about Roger was the fact that the horse went back onto Lasix for that last race at Woodbine. And it was a really big race, and you're allowed to, because you're up in Canada there. In North America, wouldn't have been able to. The prior races were okay. They weren't terrible by any means, but it was racing without Lasix. Of course, you can't race on Lasix in the Breeders' Cup. That was the only reason I really stayed away from that horse more than anything, because I do like the running style. But the fact that Chad Brown chose to send this one up there was the reason I did stay away. And like you mentioned, this is the beauty of watching races and handicapping races, is what we see pace scenario wise. Like I saw it one way, you see it another. And that's the thing where you have to take it into regard, because like you mentioned, there are a lot of times, Tremley, even if there is a ton of pace, all of a sudden somebody goes out there and just steals things. How many times have we seen it even in the Kentucky Derby when you're mentioning 4 or 5 horses could go out there and show speed and everybody says, oh, well, I don't want to get stuck out there and be done at the quarter pole, so I'm not going to go. And then one horse goes and could steal it. So I do like the comments that you make about an Italian, because that horse has to be committed to the front end, especially from the outside, because you have to try to clear over there. So I like what your thought process is there with an Italian. One of us, both of us, I don't expect are going to be moving onward past that leg. Maybe if Nashville can get by for both of us, we can. That's the leg that I do find to be pretty tough there. Now,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no! I think that your strategy is not necessarily bad in here, because you have a horse that is legitimate, and kind of what I was saying, I think in the last video, that sometimes you can look at these races and you can start making cases for everybody, and at some point it just you have to kind of make some decisions. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a favorite that I think is is solid in this race.
Yeah, and you're right. It comes down to just having to make decisions, because there are so many good horses. There's so many talented horses. Hey, sometimes you have to pick and choose who you want to go to and where you want to spread. And the Breeders' Cup Mile could be the race, one of those where you do have to spread a little bit as well. This is a race that's a very interesting race, just kind of looking up and down the field here, pace scenario-wise, wagering-wise, what you're going to see. Modern Games is the horse that is your favorite here. This is a horse that's sitting at 7-2, who definitely has to be in the mix in this spot. I think it's a horse that you must have to use. So, Emily, why don't we start out with talking about Modern Games?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you covered it, because he is one that you do have to use. He's very quality, going in again for these top connections. He's making his 3rd start off the layoff. Maybe showed some regression at Ascot, because that was a big effort at Woodbine. That's a 1-turn mile. He ran a huge effort that day, coming back on 28 days with the ship. All those factors. We've already seen him in the States, what he can do. So just a horse that you want to have on your tickets. But again, it's another one that it's not going to be too creative, because a lot of people are going to have them on the tickets.
Yeah, and here's the thing about it. After Modern Games, Emily, this is how crazy I thought this race was. You and I, between the two of us, have 6 other horses that are not alike that are on the ticket in this race. So that's how wide open things are. Malabat is a horse that you do have in the mix as well. This is a horse that I thought raced really well in that last out. I think, Emily, you're going to get your 15-1 on this horse too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that you should get it, because she is a 3-year-old filly. She's taking on older, but just looks to be improving. She's good. She shows up every time she tries. She's proven around 2 turns and left-handed. And she finished behind Kinross, which is another horse in this race, who's a very, very, very solid horse. If this race was around one turn, he would definitely be on the tickets. But just the fact that he's a short price and it is 2 turns in the draw, all those factors. So for price, I went with Malavat in there, and I think she should be a price for compensating for all those factors.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And then right next to that one, Order of Australia. This is a move that I really like, Emily. Aidan O'Brien had this horse racing overseas. Then you come in, you get a start over the course, and it was a really good start back on October the 8th. What do you think about the turnaround here for Order of Australia?
No, this is what they want to do. The more I kind of go through this, I think there's probably tickets I'm going to play that I'm going to actually single him in this spot
Sure.
because of the value. That last race I thought was exceptional, and they're going to come in here, and they've always liked this horse. They have this horse going well. He ran at Keeneland back in 2021, and the breeder, at Keeneland anyways.
Yep.
And just is in kind of the right place and time and should run his race.
Yep, and you talk about a horse that comes out of that race. Dream Loafer is a horse that is definitely worth a look at 6-1. You mentioned some of these other horses that, again, Kinross, a horse that could be a factor here. The question is 2 turns. How is the horse going to handle kind of how things unfold for the race and the pace scenario? And again, when you get 14 in a spot like this, you never know. One other question I want to ask you about, and neither of us have the horse on the ticket here, so if you don't want to say too much about it, that's fine. But what do you make of a horse like Domestic Spending? Only for the fact that the horse hasn't raced since 21, but it's also coming back from Chad Brown's barn, and this is a horse that does have a lot of ability in back class. But again, only 8 lifetime starts. You're coming back in the Breeders' Cup off a year layoff. What did you make of Domestic Spending in this race?
Well, there's a couple things to note. So he was entered in the Breeders' Cup actually last year at Del Mar, but they were entered in the Breeders' Cup Turf, which is that 12 furlong race. And it kind of seems like, looking at his pattern, that they were wanting to run him in those longer races. And so the fact that he's in the mile today is sort of negative. If they were going to actually run him in the turf, I might like him a little bit more. And I just think there are a lot of hurdles in here. The layoff, obviously, Top Connections can have him ready. The comments from Chad Brown are all positive. You can read into that what you will. So can this horse certainly win? Yes, absolutely. But I think he's going to be is listed at 8-1 on the morning line. It's just not a horse like in the single digit range that I want to back. I could certainly, if this horse wins, am I going to be surprised? No, but it just comes down to number. He has had some favorable trips. Obviously he's a good horse. Like I said, he could certainly win, but the combination of the distance, the placement, those were kind of the main factors to me.
Yeah, and I'm with you. It comes down to value too. If you're looking at Domestic Spending on Breeders' Cup Day and the horse is 22-1, okay, maybe that's a little bit different story and you're throwing the horse in an exact or something. But you're right. I agree with you. 8-1 off over a year. It's just a little bit too much for me. All right, the last leg of this sequence is the Breeders' Cup Turf. It goes as a race number 10. And again, it's a tough race there. You can go a few different ways in this spot. But let's start with some horses nearer the inside. Let's start with the horse from the barn of trainer Billy Mott, Warlike Goddess. This is a horse that raced at the Belmont at Aqueduct meeting that last out. That was an ultra impressive number. That was the best figure of this horse's career. What do you make of a horse like Warlike Goddess in this spot?
Yeah, I mean, they're running her here because she's a stayer. She's a 12 furlong type. This is the right race for her as far as distance. She's in form. She runs her race every time. So she for me is, of the horses that are at a shorter price, she's one that I'm definitely using.
Yeah, and I agree with you here. And it's something they could have gone in the Filly and Mare Turf. They're saying, no, we're going in the Breeders' Cup Turf. You only do that if you think that the horse is that good. Because when you can win the Filly and Mare Turf and you're looking at multi-million-dollar purse, or you're looking at a race here where it's a $4 million purse, you do it because you think you can win it. So I'm with you there. Now, the horse right next to it, 15-1 on Stone Age. This is a horse that both of us are going to have on our tickets. And this is the one thing, when I looked at this race, I didn't see a whole lot of pace. So I thought a horse like Stone Age could get that trip from at least on or near the lead, because I thought really Bye Bye Melvin was the only other one to show speed in this spot. What do you make of Stone Age in here?
Yeah, well, the thing is, Stone Age, it's kind of a little bit of value. I could certainly see the trip and the pace angle, but he's coming out of races with Nation's Pride and those races in New York, and I thought Stone Age ran better. So the fact just in terms of value, that where a horse like Nation's Pride could be favored in this race, 7-2 on the morning line, and watching those races thinking Stone Age ran the better race
Yeah.
in both of them, where, Nation's good horse, but he's had some favorable trips in both of those races. He's the horse that I want for me. And by contrast, not using Nation's Pride.
Well, and that's the thing about it. And you make a good point there, because Nation's Pride is your 7-2 favorite here. I don't know if the horse will, or 7-2 second choice, excuse me. I don't know if the horse should even be 7-2 in this spot. I was thinking more 5, 6, 8-1. The races overseas for Nation's Pride were pretty good. Yeah, you're coming in off back-to-back victories, but I thought a lot of other horses have run a lot more impressive races than what you've seen out of Nation's Pride. I thought that was the one line that was a little bit short. Although I'm never going to knock a lines maker too much, because I mess up lines at times too, and people that you can knock them all the time. So,
well, I think
I was a little surprised at 7-2.
Yeah, I think before we move on to that, I think it's a lot of the morning line that'll go into this is because of Appleby and because of the recent record of this trainer during Breeders' Cup. I mean, just pretty much in the U.S. as of late. So I think it'll be a shorter price, not necessarily on the horse itself, but based on the connection. So I could see where they're going that way, and then obviously kind of the same angle with number 5, Rebels Romance.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it, because William Buick picks Nation's Pride over Rebels Romance, rode Rebels Romance in that last out. That was a really good effort there. So that's a horse that could definitely be a factor in that spot too. Now, Broom's the other one that you gave a look to in here, 12-1 in this spot. What was it that jumped out to you about Broom?
His two stateside races just stand out. They're both extremely solid. The Breeders' Cup Turf back in 2021, that was we have it rated like a winning type race for the level. He ran well at Saratoga in the Sword Dancer, broke slow that day. So it's just, coming over here for whatever reason, the horse just pops with a big race, whether it's timing, whether it's preparation. Who knows, but that's the reason. Both those races just jump out at me. And again, just a price type horse that I'm using in this race.
And this is one of those horses that I think, despite a horse that races overseas and gets a lot of really soft courses, doesn't seem to like the soft course as much. A firm turf's going to be beneficial for Broom. Broom's going to be a fantastic price, and that's a horse that you do have to at least put in the mix. That's the one that I think if I go back and look at my tickets, I might actually throw this horse on my ticket, because we'll take a look at our pick 4 tickets here. Again, the beauty of this one, Emily, it's a 50-cent base minimum. So because of that, you can spread a little bit more. And as you see there, you got some coverage basically across the board where you can get some value in each and every race.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of opinion in here where I'm really kind of taking a stand is actually in that 10th race by not using either Rebels Romance or Nation's Pride, because I think both those horses will be overused, and there are alternatives. So there are some favorites, there are some shorter prices that I'm using in those legs, and then that's the race that I'm going to try to get creative and hit a price in there.
Yeah, and the thing about it, you look at the tickets, okay, you say $30 or $54 for a pick 4. In a sequence like this, this is something that should pay, I think, probably in the thousands mark. I would tend to think, unless you're going favorite, which is going to be very tough to do for this sequence. You're always going to have some prices, probably 2 or 3 prices in here. So it is worth it diving in a little bit deeper. This is one of the wagers that is a favorite of people, especially on Saturday, because so many people are betting on Breeders' Cup Saturday. So you're going to have a huge pool. You're going to have a lot of opinions, Emily. I think this is a wager that it's not too bad to go a little bit deeper and get a little bit more coverage, even if it costs you a few more bucks. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as I mentioned before, there might be a scenario where I do single the 10 in race 8 in that third leg, which would cut the ticket down dramatically. So there are some ways, but at least I want to make sure that people kind of understand, the theory that goes into when we putting these tickets together, where we're trying to go, because having kind of that foundation and basis will help people, even if they have a slightly different opinion, or I'm going to use a little bit of Jim, but a little bit of Emily here,
Right.
or kind of like use this type of like hybrid type theory in races, because the ticket structure is in some ways so more than the handicapping, right? Like that's the key piece.
Yep, it's managing your bankroll, finding the way where you feel you can get the most bang for your buck, well cashing that ticket, because of course that's the most important thing. Bang for your buck doesn't help if you're not cashing in the end. So definitely worth looking into. So that's how Emily and I see the all turf pick 4 on Saturday. It's an excellent sequence there, Emily. It's something that we hope everybody jumps into throughout the course of the day for the Breeders' Cup. But we have a couple more videos to come because there's a couple of races we want to focus on. Of course, we're going to talk about the Breeders' Cup Classic, but there's another race that's the first race on Saturday of the Breeders' Cup races that could have tremendous value. That's the filly and mare sprint. So we're going to touch on that in a little bit, but good luck to everybody with your all-turf pick 4. Make sure you check out all our videos on our YouTube channel at Hawthorne Racecourse, and hopefully Emily and I can give you a little bit of guidance, but make sure you check in for all 4 Breeders' Cup videos.